Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name's Nicole. I have two books to talk to you about. They are both, I guess, like fantasy adventures. And yeah, I feel like one of them is really well known and like everybody has read it, and I finally have read it as well. The other one is Gilgamesh. Oh, I didn't tell you. The first one is Dungeon Crawler Carl, but I'm pretty sure I've put it up on the screen so you know. And the other one is Gilgamesh, written by Emily H. Wilson. No, not the same Emily Wilson that wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad. This is a different one, thus the H in her name. But I'm going to start by talking about the one that you're probably all here to hear about, which is Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is by Matt Dinniman, and I don't know, do I have anything different to say about it from anybody else? Maybe. We'll see. If for some reason you don't know, this book was published in 2020. It's a work of science fiction fantasy. It's definitely a satire, in my opinion, and it is about Carl, and let's just be honest, it's about his ex-girlfriend's cat, Princess Donut, as well. Those are the two most important people in the book. And Carl is just kind of going about his life, doing his thing, and watching his girlfriend's cat until she comes back from vacation. Sorry, his ex-girlfriend's cat. And suddenly the apocalypse happens. It's the end of the world as he knows it. Every building and surface under which you could stand collapses, crushing and killing everyone under them. Carl and Princess Donut, however, happen to be fortunate enough to be outside when this occurs, and as they try to figure out what is going on, they hear an announcement letting them know that yes, indeed, that was the end of the world, and they can choose to stay on the surface of the earth and see how that goes, or they can enter a tunnel that's about to be unlocked and go down into a dungeon to join a reality TV show that is going to be about dungeon crawling, and they are the crawlers. Yup, it's weird, and it only continues to get weirder as the book goes on. So, given the title of the book, we all know what Carl chooses to do, and him and Princess Donut enter on the opportunity of a lifetime? I don't know that that's what it is, but they do decide to go down into the dungeon, and this book explores what they find down there, the adventures that they go on, as they try to do basically nothing other than survive everything that they find in the tunnels. And what follows is a really, really unique story, at least in my opinion. I mean, I guess it's LitRPG, and that's already an existing genre, so this isn't a new thing to all of us. I only recently, in the last year, have even tried a dungeon crawler. It's actually one of my most favorite versions of RPGs, and if you want to talk about dungeon crawlers that you like, especially solo dungeon crawlers, like, let's chat in the comments, okay? You and me, we got this. Okay, what do I have to say about this book, however? It contained a lot of ideas I was not expecting to find in here. A lot of conversations I was not expecting to find, and they were discussed in a way that I did not expect. This is the book of unexpected. As they crawled through the dungeon, up came found family, which I did expect that one. But probably the found family and like the survival story were the only things that I did think I would discover. I wasn't expecting the corporate greed. I wasn't expecting the sadism, though that is one of the words used on the back of the book in the description of it. Go figure. And I wasn't expecting such a deep discussion about how we view people and the conversation that was had about good and evil and who's really the good people, who are really the good people, who are really the evil people, who are really the bosses and the demons in our lives. And I did watch an interview by the author Matt Dinniman, and he talks about how he just intends this book to be fun and lighthearted and like for it to have no meaning other than to be a good, entertaining adventure story. But I don't know, I guess he accidentally wrote a lot of way deeper themes and topics into his book than he intended, because that's what stood out to me and I really liked it. So what worked for me in this book? Like I said, the shockingly deep, nuanced themes and the complex characters, not something I expected to find, and oddly enough, not something I really wanted out of this book. I went into this book expecting a lighthearted, fun romp through a dungeon. I don't know. That's literally just what I wanted out of the book, a good fantasy adventure story. And it was, but it also really disturbed me at a core level, and I found it rather moving and heartbreakingly sad at times. There were points where I could feel myself tearing up, And that was not what I was expecting, even though I still liked it. There is, in my opinion, a subtle and dark tone to everything that's going on. Like everyone around Carl, and Matt Dinniman did say this, everyone around Carl is like just kind of going with the flow and getting involved and getting into it. And some of them even being absolutely silly and ridiculous. And Carl himself is taking everything really, really seriously. And I found myself identifying with Carl in a way that I did not expect. I have always struggled with games that are violent and like the slash and stab type of things. I also struggle with that in books and movies and everything. And like I struggle to like just enjoy them and have fun and not go, aren't we just killing a lot of people we don't know a lot about? And yeah, Carl has that same struggle. So there is definitely a lot of tension between things just being funny and things being dark and there being dark humor. And the lines are very thin and things bleed across one another. And I really enjoyed it. If the book fell short for me anywhere, like I have heard that this book is really humorous. I personally didn't find it really funny. I found it disturbing most of the time. So I think it's one of those things where the type of humor in it is going to hit people in a different way than others. And it wasn't because it was just gaming humor. Like I got the gaming humor and it would make me like crack a smile, but it wasn't something that was going to make me like laugh out loud and I was being gonna like roll around enjoying myself with how humorous this book was. But mileage may vary. Some people find the book extremely funny. I think it's just a specific type of humor, so you should know that going in. I know another question that a lot of people have is, do you need to know a lot about dungeon crawlers to enjoy this book? I don't think you do. I think Matt Dinniman does a pretty good job of walking you through it. However, there is a lot of like explaining it that goes on, and that can like, it's a, it's a mixed bag as to whether or not that would work for a particular reader. I did find that chapter 4, there is a lot of explanation going on that at first felt humorous and then eventually felt dreadful. And it was funny in that I caught the joke that was being made about when that type of situation happens to you when you're playing a game, but I still didn't find it that funny, and so eventually it just felt really boring. I think the other thing that I was surprised about and didn't like as much as I expected about the book was I thought it was going to be medium to fast paced. To me, this actually felt like a pretty slow paced book. I felt like we spent a lot of time with Carl in very specific situations for a very long time. Now, granted, this is book 1 in the series, and I've heard that it just gets better and people seem to eat it up and love it and da da da, but I'm not one of those people who will read book 1 and then will just keep going on with the series because book 4 is going to be like the climax. Like I need to like book 1 in order to go on to book 2. Am I going to go on to book 2? I don't know, not anytime soon. Which brings me to the other thing that I really didn't like about this book is the ending. What was that ending? He might as well have just stopped in the middle of the sentence and not actually finished it because it almost felt like he did. And I really don't like that. I don't care if we all know there's going to be a book 2. Like, at least finish the thought. And it didn't feel like the thought was finished. And I now understand why people finish the book and they're like, oh, I ran out and bought the second book. Yeah, because you wanted that thought to be finished. Like, if I stopped in mid-sentence. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that book. Yeah, I'll put my rating up on the screen because for some reason I forgot to like leave that out for you or leave that out for me. What am I even saying? I forgot to write down what my rating of the book was. Oh, but I know what it was. Oh my gosh, what's going on in my head? Well, that's all I have to say about that book. I ended up rating it 4.5 stars, which was a lot higher than the viewers in my reading sprint thought I was going to rate it because I read the end of the book during reading sprints, and I think I was just struggling with it so much and was like, it was breaking my heart in a lot of ways. That I think they thought I was going to rate it lower. I thought for a while maybe I was going to rate it lower, but I gave it 4.5 stars. I did really like the book. It just wasn't what I thought it was going to be in terms of theme and tone for me. And because of that, I think I just put it during my reading schedule at a point where I needed a lighthearted book, and that just wasn't it for me. That's not why I gave it 4.5 stars. I gave it the 4.5 because I thought it was too slow for what it was trying to do. Anyway, I think this is a book for, one, anybody who loves dungeon crawling and dungeon crawling games. I think this is a great book for people who like plot-driven books but don't like the characters to just be like plot devices in a weird way. And if you like deep and complex characters, I think this book will actually work well for you as well. If you like to think about the ethics of how we live and work together, and who are the real enemies in our lives, this is surprisingly a really good book for that. So I would maybe read this again, maybe continue on. I'm still on the fence about that. I would definitely have to try book two in a time where I was ready for something a little bit more deep, but maybe just more plot driven than normal. I think this book reminds me of The Hunger Games a lot, like including in terms of tone. Like The Hunger Games is way darker, way heavier, no doubt about that. But I think the dungeon crawl felt more similar to what the game and the Hunger Games felt like to me. If that gives you any idea of the type of tone that I felt like it was like. I think it also reminds me, not as violent, not quite anyway, as violent as Battle Royale. They're not doing a Battle Royale in the dungeon crawl, but there's elements of it that feel like that. You definitely have all that tension and stuff. I think I would have liked this book a bit better, however, if the pacing was more similar to The Knife of Letting Go. And you can see from all of those books, if you've read any of them, that the tones of those books are kind of heavier, even though they're adventurous. And that was how this book felt to me. And I don't know, I had very mixed feelings about it, but overall, I thought it was a really good book. I thought it was written really well, and I think it's one that is worth a hype for sure. I think for some people it will be a 5-star, and I think for other people it'll hit somewhere in the 4s, but I would be really surprised if people rated it a lot lower than that, especially if they were just looking for something to entertain them. Book 2, another fantasy adventure. Here we go, Gilgamesh by Emily H. Wilson. This is book 2 in the Sumerian trilogy. I almost forgot what the trilogy was called. And yeah, I was really excited to get to it. This was actually the first book in the trilogy that I owned because I have been wanting to read the Epic of Gilgamesh. I read it before in college, I think, and I wanted to read it again. And so when I initially saw this, I thought this was like somebody doing a modern translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's not. I've since read that. I reviewed it, I think, last weekend. And this is actually a reimagining and a retelling of all of Sumerian mythology, which is the mythology that existed in Mesopotamia. And in this case, it includes the Epic of Gilgamesh, though the Epic of Gilgamesh is mainly talked about in book 1 of this series. Now, I'm not going to talk specifically about what book 2 in this series is about. I'm going to talk about the series as a whole, and then I'll tell you about my thoughts in terms of how I felt book 2 went. So book 1 is called Inanna, and I'll put that up on the screen. It starts us out, it includes most of the story that you will find in the actual Epic of Gilgamesh, but it also includes 2 other major characters, which is Inanna, who is one of the major mythological goddesses in Sumeria, and who later, interestingly enough, like a lot of the mythology surrounding her becomes lined up with the mythology and sort of usurped by the mythology that eventually becomes that of Aphrodite. We also follow the mythological legends surrounding the goddess Ninshbar, which is the name of book 3. So I wouldn't say that so far in my experience these books follow each of the characters that they're named after. You get parts of the story of all 3 characters in all 3 books. At least I'm assuming the same is going to happen in book 3. So it's definitely a book that is multiple point of view, where you're spending time with each of these 3 characters and a couple of other characters as well. So you get a couple of different points of view as the stories go on. You get some different points of view in book 2 than you got in book 1. I think the thing that I'm really enjoying about this series overall, and at this point I will be specifically talking about Gilgamesh, is the writing and the intrigue. I think that Emily H. Wilson does a really good job of just like making you curious about what's going on. There's a lot of unanswered questions. Part of the premise of the book is that things are changing and people are trying to stick to the new ways but going back to old ways, and nobody really knows what anybody else is really doing, and you definitely get sucked into that. If book 2 fell short for me in any way, I think it just left me with too many questions throughout the whole book and not enough answers. And so I did find myself about 2/3 of the way through the book getting kind of frustrated because I felt like I needed more answers to something, and it was starting to feel like you're intentionally withholding information from me just to make the book longer. So I think I either needed the book to be shorter at that point, or I just needed her to reveal something, to share a little something, and to answer a few questions. That said, there was enough other activity going on that I was willing to continue to the end, even though it did make this book feel a little slower than book one did. I think the best part of this book for me was the end. And not in a bad way, not like the best part was when it finally ended. No, the best part was the end when everything finally did get brought together. Because, like I said, there were so many questions, and I think she did a really good and thorough job of resolving a lot of the issues, though not all of them, because we still have one more book to go, while also creating more problems for us to carry on into book three and not leaving any plot holes, which I feel like is pretty impressive because there was a lot of plot and subplot to kind of manage and keep hold of, and I think she did it successfully. The other thing that I think was done really well in this book is that I think she managed to land us on a cliffhanger without stopping dead in the middle of her sentence. Yeah, that was a slight jab at the last book. So I'll put my star rating for this up on the screen, and apparently I stopped dead in my notes and that's all I wrote about this. So I guess that's all I have to say. Hopefully this week will be a slightly shorter video on these two books. I really enjoyed them both. Let me know if you've read, well, this one, because you've probably read this one. But let me know what your thoughts are on these books if you've read them both, or if you haven't read one of them and you're now interested in reading them. I'd be curious to know that as well. That's it for me today. I am looking forward to starting book 3 in this series, which is the final book in this series. It probably won't happen until sometime later this year, but I would like to finish the series by the end of the year. So that is my goal. That's it for me today. I hope you had a great reading week. Why do I keep trying to say that? I stumble over that every single time. I hope you're enjoying your reading, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye!